Okay, we are on another drink club, monthly drink club, and now we're in June, and we are John Espey and myself, Tino H. Carter, and we have Rachael Green with us.
All right.
How
Cheers.
are you? What are you drinking, Rachael?
Cheers, Rachel.
Cheers. Oh, everyone
Cheers,
has ice.
guys.
This is 40%. I don't need ice.
Oh, nice.
So this is Paul John. It's an Indian single malt whiskey. It's one of the only Indian whiskeys that you can find pretty much anywhere. And it's done in, I guess you could say, a style is kind of like a Scottish single malt, but it's just pretty awesome. Nice caramelly colors. You almost get like these vanilla, but also like kind of like cardamomish spices in there. It goes really well with a lot of I make cocktails, so it goes really well with a lot of like Indian spices and things too, which is nice.
I like the fact that today you're not drinking a cocktail.
Nope, not today.
Very nice.
Keeping it lean.
You're actually here not only because you have an awesome brain and understanding and you are awesome, but because you're a great example for interesting pivoting during COVID.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that John and I, we talked about it on the first time we did a podcast just when COVID started, and we talked about you. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so for the past 10 years, since I've been growing in my skill sets of within hospitality and within sales, I always knew that I wanted to run my own thing or do my own thing. My dad is an entrepreneur. I always wanted to, at some point, run my own show. And I'm very good at optimizing other people's processes. So eventually I figured, well, maybe I should start my own. So I was in the liquor industry for the past 10 years and then kind of switched over to a different industry for a short while in promotional products. But since right before COVID happened, I started doing in-person cocktail classes here in Charlotte. And John's come to a couple of those, which was awesome. And, I've actually made you cocktails before. Then COVID happened and I started doing everything virtually. I started by kind of testing the market and doing some of these things on my own social platforms.
On your Facebook or Instagram or what? Yeah.
Yeah. So I did a live cocktail class with 3 cocktails, like same kind of style I would do an in-person class, but then I kind of just did them on live stream and monitored questions and comments and things like that and answered things. But my first video got over 700 views.
Nice.
So I was like, well, maybe I should do something like this. So I actually got with John shortly thereafter, and he gave me some advice on some ways to market it to make it more profitable for me beyond just tips. And that's when I started really pushing the sales aspect of doing these private classes for people, similar to this on Zoom, but for more corporate settings or private parties virtually. And maybe eventually get into something again in person. But for now, this is a really awesome platform because I can utilize people all over the country or all over the world.
Yeah, and Rachel, I think this is great because I think this highlights for people why they need to invest in their own personal brand, whether you're doing it virtually or you're doing it in a bricks and mortar setting. You need to invest in building your personal brand, building your following on Instagram, building your following on Facebook. There's no downside to having more followers and more reach. And this illustrates very quickly, if you hadn't already built up some followers and had that reach to talk to your customers, it would have been a lot harder for you to make the switch and to get 700 viewers on the first virtual event, right?
Right. Yeah. So on my Facebook, I already have 3,600 connections. LinkedIn, I have about 36, 34, something growing. And on Instagram, I have almost 2,000. So that is a very important part when you are pivoting. So this is something I've highlighted before in another virtual kind of meetup like this, was how you pivot. So what are your strengths already? What are some things that you consider yourself an expert or have other people considered you an expert in? And maybe that's the direction if you do pivot towards something, but not something that you're like, oh, I think I could be good at that. And then you get into it and you realize you have, nothing about any of this, and you just shut down.
Yeah.
Which we all get to those points where we're, moving through these processes, and we realize something that we thought was just one step away might be 3 steps. So kind of breaking those things down. But if it's something that you're passionate about and you've already invested time into, in some ways, then pivoting not so fully, or also pivoting your marketing message. You don't have to necessarily pivot your product at all, but pivot your message.
Correct.
Well, and in your case, Rachel, selling to people like me who just are looking for an enjoyable thing to do during the week and go make some cocktails with you, but pivoting that towards a different audience, but doing the exact same thing, but it's maybe a little bit easier to hit a corporate client because they need to do morale building events. That's a pivot as well, but it's not changing fundamentally what the product is. It's just who you deliver it to and how they buy it and purchase it from you.
And I feel like at this point, people, and I have a couple of clients because I also do social media strategy for a couple of people, and I have clients that are very like in person with their product and their service, and they think about this social platform as very limiting, when in fact it's just like so expansive with the amount of people that you could get in front of. So I think that's a very important mindset switch too.
It's interesting, Rachel. I interviewed on my podcast a lady named Lauren Maccabee. She owned a yoga studio, very successful. They had reached capacity of 52 people, and she was having to turn people away. And she had started to think about, how do I go virtual? But she was always worried about going virtual because it wasn't perfect, and she thought it needed to be perfect. And then guess what? When COVID hits, it doesn't need to be perfect. I did her yoga class virtually on Zoom the other day, paid my $10 through Venmo, got the Zoom link sent to me. There were 165 people on it, paying $10 a pop. So it's really,
Not limited
she's scaling it. And I said to her, I was like, you can get to 1,000 users digitally. There's no reason you can't get to 10,000. And I think that's the thing about digital businesses, is they just scale in a way that non-digital businesses could never even dream of. And an example I heard somebody give is, I heard the former COO of Medtronic and CIO of Georgia Pacific talk about what digital transformation is. And he's 6'5" African-American gentleman. He's like, look, StubHub didn't invent selling tickets, scalping tickets. He's like, you could go down to Atlanta State baseball stadium any Friday and see people scalping tickets, but the difference is they can only sell it for that one game, whereas StubHub in a digital market can scalp tickets on any sport, any event, at any time, to anybody, anywhere in the world. And it's just, you can't imagine, like, there's no way to scale businesses that are brick and mortar the way that you can scale a virtual business.
Unless you go digital.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Digital businesses just scale in ways that non-digital. And that's the beauty of it, Dino. You're exactly right. Like, it isn't an either or. If you have bricks and mortar, you can also have a digital engagement with your customers. Yep. You
have to. This whole, scare of going digital and what am I going to do? I don't know how to do that. That's the whole awesome thing about it. You can do something different. You don't have to open an e-commerce because your shop sells shirts, let's say, or shoes, okay, or whatever it is. You don't have to do that. 5 years ago, I managed online operations for a Beverly Hills pawn shop for the stars. And it was very much pedestrians and walk-ins and people in the area that would actually come in, to touch, to see, to sell their stuff. I've seen many, many, many people there, from Denzel Washington, Pamela Anderson, with no makeup on the morning, almost every morning.
I need to come shop with you, Dino, because my shopping experiences aren't that great.
Yeah, it was awesome. And the idea was that I knew that many of the big items we cannot sell online. No one will buy Britney Spears' wedding ring, which is a very expensive ring, ugly, but very expensive. no one will buy it online. Someone needs to come here, check the diamonds, see the papers and everything. So I knew that the sales will always be, the big sales will always be at the shop, but let's utilize the power of digital. Let's push on social media. Let's push on content to create that scale that John says. So you have more people, you have more brand awareness. So you have to understand that it's utilizing, and you can do different things, and you don't have to think inside the box. You just need to utilize digital, or you can do the other way around. Have an e-commerce, very normal platform, and then on your physical brick and mortar, create more of an experience. Don't sell anything on your physical shop, but create a really, really special on-brand experience to have a more of a holistic approach to your marketing.
I think that's huge, Dino. And I think one very real example here in Charlotte that Rachel may have visited is that there's a restaurant called Flower Child, and you can't have a pure digital experience. It's a restaurant. You go in and you eat, but they very much have made it an Instagrammable experience. And so you go in and there's these beautiful murals on the walls, and there's all sorts of things that you can just throw up a hashtag and take a picture. And you go in and you see millennials and people my age taking pictures and posting it on Instagram or posting it on social media. And they're absolutely killing it right now. Now, in their particular case, obviously with COVID, the restaurants are shut down. They're selling through DoorDash and through some of the other delivery services now. But I think that's a prime example where if you can think through the digital strategy, but it's delivered in the store, or even if you can do it where I'm delivering it through DoorDash, but I still may have a good presentation of the food. I think that's really the future. To me, it isn't. Not every business has to be a digital native. And most businesses aren't. You look at Uber, a digital native company, there's still a physical experience that you have with digital. It's just a purely digital payment. It's a purely digital dispatch. It's a purely digital hailing operation. But fundamentally, the product is a brick and mortar product.
So Rachel, are you continuing with that? Like that's your thing right now?
Yeah, so I'm doing a few things. So it's kind of splitting up my time, exploring more social media strategy and how the world is evolving in the social world and the digital marketing world are things I'm intensively educating myself on right now. Utilizing different platforms to post across different platforms with community management softwares like Sprout Social, and some copywriting classes. And,
very important.
Yeah, and some good photography tools, which has been really important, and kind of figuring out my strategy and teaching people that are very overwhelmed by the process of even beginning. Teaching them the kind of basics so it's not so scary to jump in using social platforms and which social platforms to use for the type of industry that they're servicing. So it's kind of how I'm playing in both wheelhouses right now. That's mostly my brand, my beta brand, you would say, is this cocktails, which I'm actually rebranding right now. So I'm going to wait till I have all the bows tied.
I think you can create a huge, empire out of it, really, in a year.
Yeah, so I want it to be ultimately, I'm developing my mission and everything right now, because right now I have the service, right? So I have this service, I have it all dialed in, and then I'm going through and kind of breaking down my mission and vision, and so that I can expand and that the message is clear of what I'm doing. So it's ultimately an experiential, educational experience in making cocktails and understanding spirits and techniques and balance. So
that's interesting. That's interesting that you're doing that with a branding expert like Dino, because to me, I talked about this on one of my podcasts with a guy named Juan Garzon, who's a local branding specialist. And what we found at Level was that divorcing the brand from the culture is very difficult. The two reinforce one another. Your brand becomes your culture. And I think that what you're talking about with mission, you're probably looking at core values, you know, strategies, that drives culture. That also ultimately drives your brand. I think once you understand who you are in that way, then the branding, the two are just completely linked to one another. So that's great that you're working on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the experience itself is pretty unique, but if I can have something that people can really connect with on a deeper level than just, okay, thanks, bye, you know, then to me, that means a lot more. I know that I am the type of person that likes to leave a very like indelible impression. So that's very important to me, that what I'm saying is clear, and my brand is clear as well.
I think from your consumers and customers point of view, what is it that you create in their heart, gut, and mind that is unique? They want to feel in a specific way. They think about something that it's totally intangible, and it can be either in their mind, in their gut, in their heart, an emotion or a feeling that they want to get out of the experience, out of your services. If you will find that, what is it? Mm-hmm. That's when the alignment with everything will actually get to the point that we want, and to the deep ends and deep connections and retention that you want. It's hard, but it's a
deep understanding of the service at its
right.
like most hospitable core, what they want to feel, what they're not getting right now.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this, Rachel. A lot of the times when we're selling enterprise software, which is what we do at Defiance, we define buyer personas, and it's just who is the person that's buying this. And for us, there's probably, for most of our businesses, there are 3 or 4 people that buy our software, and they meet. You know, you hate the it's almost a stereotyping exercise, but you're creating, this is a generic person who is buying this. So it might be a system administrator in my case, or it might be a procurement executive, or it might be an HR executive, or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. Depending on the product. And then you can tailor your messaging, and the message, you're selling the same product, but it's solving a different problem for each of those buyers. Do you think that way? Because I can just imagine that there's me being a 43-year-old guy coming to your class. I want something different than the 25-year-old lady who's coming to the class, or the 60-year-old couple who's coming together. Do you think that way?
I do. Yeah. So for me, I'm kind of breaking all of those things out right now, whether it's corporate setting. So the experience is the same, but you know, with corporate setting, there's team building. With, you know, someone more like I'm doing really well with real estate agents. So real estate agents and their clients, or real estate agents and their other brokers, or, you know, people that have these really good connections that they're trying to like build these stronger bonds with, which is really great. But those deeper demographics are something I'm working on right now too. And that's where I'm getting a lot of my analytics from, a lot of the content I'm putting out there, and getting some analytics back. Because it's so funny when you put out content, and then as you're getting engagement back, you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that person, or I didn't even think that they would be so invested in seeing where this goes next.
Yeah, you can create a survey, for instance, with, you know, Google surveys. It's totally free, and you just email that to everyone and ask them a lot of psychographics questions.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, another one. It's good.
Yeah, mine was a pretty good pour, honestly. So
yeah, mine too. I'm still on the first one, and look how much I have.
Sounds like Noah's Mill is no joke too. That's like 117 proof. What is that?
Yeah, I poured a small one for the Noah's Mill, and
Nice.
this is a friend of mine's that he left at my house, so I felt bad doing a big pour, so I did a small pour of the Noah's Mill.
Your friends leave really great stuff at your house all the time.
And you're Angel Envy right now.
And this is the
rye?
This is the rye with the rum cast finish. This is the most
that's a rum
fantastic.
finish?
Yeah, it's delicious. It's the best. It's the best bourbon or best whiskey I've had under $100.
Is all the rye finished in rum?
I think they've got a couple different ones. The bourbon is port
I drank
barrels.
that in Kentucky, actually, this one, the port one. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
Wow.
Why don't you go to Kentucky?
Went to Woodford Reserve and to the Derby. I can't wait for the next time that I'm there. I mean,
Dino, you strike me as very LA. You do not strike me as Kentucky or Tennessee.
Oh, I think you can get on.
do you know what I'm doing next week?
What are you doing next week?
I'm gonna drive cattle.
All right.
Dude, I'm a cowboy.
You are an international man of mystery, sir.
Seriously.
Yeah,
what
I
other
ride horses.
You have?
I'm like the most, like crazy rocker and super urban, but
right.
just let me go to the green pastures, ride horses, and do cowboy stuff.
Yeah. I love it. I think that, the digital world is really awesome, and it's definitely a great way to utilize the overhead that you have. And if you're already paying rent and you can't use your property, you might as well book online.
Just because we're starting to wrap it up, I know we can talk for like 5 hours, the three of us. But founder of Reddit, Alexis Anaheim, stepped down to get a Black person. I think it's amazing. What's interesting is that he is now investing in fighting a hate speech through startups. John, do you think, and I think that yes, it's now the private money and private companies need to do that because they can, and because Facebook and others don't really do what they can and supposed to be doing, let alone governments?
I do, and I think Facebook's in a different position because I don't understand. I think there's a lot of nuance to the decisions that Zuckerberg and Jack over at Twitter are making right now. But I think those two companies are in a different position than most other companies. So I can kind of give them a pass for saying, hey, we're not going to take a position. I think it's totally appropriate for any startup to come out against hate speech, to talk about it, to have the dialogue, especially we see that there's injustice in this world. I think our society is way better than it was 50 years ago, certainly better than it was 100 years ago or 150 years ago, but it needs to keep improving. And in America in particular, the federal government is not, we're a very big, very diverse country, and there's powers that are delegated down to the states, to the local governments, but also in the corporate structure. And I think it's completely appropriate for a small company to take a stance and say, we're not standing for this anymore. And especially when you're trying to build a diverse workforce and a workforce that's represented by people who don't traditionally feel represented, I think it's very appropriate for companies to take these kind of stands. And I applaud them for doing it.
Do you think we will see that trend way past this couple of weeks when everyone's trying to go and top the diversity, no racist?
We have short memories. I don't, raise your hand if you remember the Australia fires or Kobe dying in a helicopter crash. We have very short memories, but this one feels different to me. This one feels like maybe this is the time that we don't just pay lip service. Maybe we make some actual change in this society, and hopefully that's what we see happen here.
I think so. I like this positive note as a great way to finish our monthly drinking club. And I want to say thanks to both of you. Rachel, you're amazing. John, you're more than amazing as always. And
awesome resources and personalities for me to look up to, for sure, which is great.
Hell yeah.
And drink with, obviously.
Yeah.
Cheers to that.
Cheers, guys. See you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.